Hello, my name is Esther Baldwin, and I develop policy and engagement campaigns for the Black Appalachian Coalition. Today, we are kicking off our BLAC Wave initiative, which is a movement that seeks to gather, educate, and empower Black voices in electoral, legislative, regulatory, and budget advocacy in 2024 and beyond. Due to our reputation as trusted messengers with deep community roots, BLAC is uniquely well-positioned to reach underrepresented voters. Today, I'm joined by Melanie Meade, environmental justice advocate from Clairton, Pennsylvania. Melanie, can you share a bit about your background and experiences that have shaped your views on politics and what you're thinking about as it relates to the 2024 election?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My father was very active in politics. He was on city council for over 12 years, and he ran for mayor 3 times of the city of Clairton. So that experience shaped me in that I knew we had a right to be there, and I knew that voting was important. But I saw what we later came to know or call like vote shaving. So I learned that was how my father had lost his elections, because the city of Clairton is run by the USX Coke industry. And the industry has a lot of leverage with our elected officials. And those elected officials have never shown care for the health harms that the people in the community have experienced. So it made it very difficult for me to believe in voting, even though I knew my situation wasn't the experience of everyone else in the world. It just felt like, what difference would the vote make if I didn't make it? And that wasn't what I experienced when I lived in North Carolina or when I lived in Virginia. But it's definitely what I experienced living here.
Wow. How do you think that the narrative of Appalachia, the fact that it's always presented as white and rural, contributes to that silencing of voices, or that perceived silencing of voices?
I think that it is definitely a negative contributing factor, because the people, the Black voices who are there, don't know that they are in Appalachia. So when we call for Appalachian stories, some of the Black families that I've spoken to tell me, I'm not Appalachian. I say, well, you live in the region. Yes, I do, but I do not identify as Appalachian. And so when we see, funding sources being made available to the Appalachian region, and when we see certain factors affecting the Appalachian region, we are never considered, because we don't even know to be at the table in many cases. And that has a lot to do with miseducation and misinformation. Like we talked about the whitewashing of our history. I knew I was in Appalachia because my father drove the Appalachian region to visit family. That was our summer, activity, was to go through Appalachia, down in Tennessee, Florida even, to visit family through the summer. And we drove. We didn't fly or catch the train. So I remember those highways, and like I being able to identify. I wasn't educated here in Pennsylvania. I think that made it a major difference. I was educated in Winchester, Virginia, which is about 40 minutes right outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Very, very racially driven. But my experience there, I had more freedom there than I have here in this small town. I have a lot more impeded against me, and in the way of me helping and helping to gain people's trust and to get their stories out, because of the power of industry over the political people who are in charge of spaces, like where I rent a space to talk. A library would be a great place to have this type of conversation with the community. I think it can leverage a lot of voices and stories, but I'm unable to use the library for that.
Wow. You talked about a little bit, some of the barriers. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the barriers that you have felt, or the difference between your experience and the power of your voice in Virginia versus Pennsylvania?
Absolutely. I think in Pennsylvania, a lot of people enjoy hearing me. Not too many enjoy taking action with me, or some will say that I'm causing trouble because I'm using my voice here, because no one has ever raised their voice to this capacity. Everyone has generally said the industry is here, it belongs here, and we need to adapt to it. But I am a child, I'm a descendant of the families that were here before the industry came.
That's great.
Yes, when I identified, land justice and how the natives to the land here were demanding their land back, it really encouraged and inspired me to take action. And it helped me to look at how my education in Virginia shaped and prepared me for this space. Because in Northern Virginia, the Ku Klux Klan had march up and sign up sheets throughout our high school.
Wow.
And I didn't have as much trouble out of the Ku Klux Klan in Virginia than I have out of the mayor and the white mayor and elected officials here in the city.
Wow.
They more disgruntled with me because I'm saying we have a right to say something about clean air rights and health harms. And in Northern Virginia, I was just demanding we have a right to know our true history. Ku Klux Klan didn't get in my way. I actually had a Spanish teacher that supported me and told me that she would teach me more of my African history in her Spanish class than I'd ever learned in that school. And she didn't lie. And because of that, I graduated high school fluent in Spanish, knowing that Africans had traveled to the Americas long before Columbus. You had relationship, families, and community. So Virginia really made me who I am, and I didn't like it. I cried a lot. I felt resentful. I felt isolated. I could look out my window and see 300 cows grazing. I wasn't used to that. I could look out my window. I look out the window now to see the USX Clarendon Coke Works, which I would take the cows any day.
I bet.
But, when I think about if my father lived in Virginia and became the professor that he became, would he have been mayor of his city? And I think so. Wow. I think that this city is extremely racist. It is driven by opportunity and capitalism. And the people have just been tossed to the side. They've never been considered. And they're like patted on the head, like, thank you for working with us and doing what you do. But there's never been a true opportunity for them to gain and realize what power they have and what they can do. And that's where I feel like I have a lot of resistance here.
Got you. So turning to look at the 2024 elections, and I'm not just talking about the presidential election, because a lot of people put emphasis on specifically that race to the exclusion of local races that can directly impact their lives. So how do you think the outcome of the 2024 elections could directly impact your life and your community there in Clairton?
It could directly impact my life if we were able to get the elected officials that care about the people over industry and over politics. We didn't have a county executive who cared about the public health of the people over the industry's profit. He wasn't willing to look at how the fines didn't really amount to much whenever it was considering them avoiding or preventing exceedances. Currently, I think we are over 90 days of an exceedance of hydrogen sulfide. And this is at the same time when they're saying that they have a high quarterly income, and they're switching over to green steel. So it's just like when people aren't looking, they're still over polluting. And we have to have elected officials that can identify and empathize with those living directly, right in the midst of it.
Yeah.
And as well downwind. I mean, there are plenty of people downwind who have experiences and health issues because of this pollution.
Yeah. Oftentimes we talk about civic engagement from the standpoint of voting and, that kind of electoral participation. But have you ever considered running as a candidate? Why or why not?
I think I had considered running in the very beginning, say about 2014, whenever I first learned about the clean air rights and what industry was doing to us.
Mm-hmm.
But it changed my mind when I saw a newly elected city councilwoman who is an African American that didn't speak out on issues that harmed the people, and specifically those people who lived in the region where her family was from. Her mother and my mother were best friends. They lived in the same, area. Mm-hmm. My mother lived in project housing, 10 children and a mother to a 2-bedroom apartment. My grandfather died, at 45 years old because of health issues, which I think were a contributing factor from living. So we lived directly across the street from the USX Coke Works.
Wow. Are you saying the project community was right across the street?
The project housing, yes.
Yeah, housing. I'm sorry. Yes.
No, yes. And that's where I think that people we don't have access to a lot of that history. Mm-hmm. But that housing project was torn down and families were given money to relocate.
So they were displaced from a place that they had grown up in. Maybe generations had come before, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Wow. And I wonder, what was the class action lawsuit? Was it that we lived in too close proximity to the mills? Mm-hmm. And there were
constructed too close to where you were already living, more accurately. Wow.
Yeah. And that's what we're dealing with this. We don't have a mayor. Our mayor has recently retired from the industry. Mm-hmm. He has had cancer twice, and he doesn't speak out about the health harms. And 1 in 20 people who live in the Clairton zip code area, 15025, are diagnosed with cancer.
It's a cancer alley.
Yeah. Exactly. I always say we should call us Cancer Valley. Cancer Alley meets Cancer Valley. Yes. Wow. Yes.
You were going to say, and I'm sorry to cut you off. You were going to say you lost, and I jumped.
Oh, yes. I lost my sister at the age of 55. I took care of an uncle at the beginning of my college career. He was passing away from cancer. So I have, many family members who died from cancer. We still don't have a support group here that talks about it, that helps the people, the victims, as well as their caregivers. And we still don't have anyone telling us how the USX coking industry is a contributing factor to that cancer. Mm-hmm. Nowhere can you find that on any of the pages of community who speak who say they care about Clairton. Like, there's a group that says called Clairton Cares. It comes from out of the mayor's work as a nonprofit, but they didn't deliver masks when fires burned, coking fires burned for over 100 days. They didn't feel it was important. And so now that environmental justice monies are at the table, they are the first, nonprofit in the community to gain access to those monies. And they were the last, and are still the last, where we can go to even identify the definition of environmental justice. It's definitely not a space where we can talk about environmental racism because it's a predominantly white run space, and the discussions are from their understanding of what's important, not from the whole community's understanding.
Wow.
Racism is it has always been very deep here. There were streets in our community, and I can remember, I was born in 74. I can remember streets in the 80s that if we heard a cousin or a relative was out late and on that street, we wondered whether they would live.
Wow.
And that's here in Clairton, and I don't, the only reason why those streets are multi-racial now are because of the white flight, the white families who left, and they started to either Section 8 their homes out, or they sold the homes and people began to use them as Section 8 homes.
I see.
Yes. So the politics, our mayor owns over 20 Section 8 homes. So he'll never want this city to be an industry city. I say, if the industry doesn't want to stop harming the health of the people, then it should give the people money to leave and then make this into just an industry, an industrial area, industrial complex. Yeah. But people like the mayor who has Section 8 property, that's definitely not in his best interest, and he's only serving his best interest.
Wow. You said a lot there. One thing I want to go back to is you talked about how race plays a factor as a barrier. When you think about voting rights and, some of the sacrifices that have happened with the voting rights movement, how do you reconcile the historical significance in that sacrifice with engagement or non-engagement at this stage as a voter?
I definitely feel that we've had a long fight to get and gain the right to vote. And I also feel like the fight continues to maintain it and sustain it, because if you have, a violation, a felony, in certain states, you're unable to vote. But that felony could be expunged and removed from your record, but does that give you the right to vote again? And in different states, it has a different law. And I think that is very harmful for us. In Pittsburgh and in the Clairton area specifically, it is because we have a high crime rate, and it's from high school. It starts early. Even here recently this year, middle school, we had a middle schooler shooting someone. So the industry provides for a lot of corruption because it's so big, it has so much money, and everyone is ignoring everything else that's going on. They're pretending that the industry is bringing in great jobs, but it's really allowing for a lot of corruption. And in that corruption, the community is torn apart because now those people who may have had a voice won't get a chance to use it. And they may not even come back or return to knowing that this is valuable for them. They may just give up and not advocate to have their rights restored. And that's what I feel like can happen, especially when we see and hear so much about Trump. I think that it can make the people in the Black communities feel like we don't have a chance because their corruption is always covered or acceptable corruption, justified corruption, Yeah.
And I know what you mean by that, because we talked a little bit about how, I want to kind of demystify or take the veil off of what you're talking about with regard to the intersection of criminality, environmental harms, and voting rights. We've talked a little bit about in other conversations that link between criminality and environmental justice. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think that when I realized that this industry was making so much money and our city had nothing, we haven't had a grocery store for 45 years.
Wow.
We have a Family Dollar, Rite Aid, and Dollar General, which all serve.
Those are intended grocery stores?
We don't have it. Yeah, our grocery store is about a 20-minute drive, an hour bus ride, and you'll wait another hour for your next bus.
Wow.
So it's difficult to get fresh food. And in an environmental justice area, you need your health, you need your nutrients in order to think clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we've created a space to take away the thought of the people to even do what's right.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the times people will say, oh, this mayor is a good mayor. And I say, well, what did he do? Oh, he painted the concession stand. Well, that's what he's supposed to do. You know,
Lowered expectations. Remember
right.
that? That's what that is. Very, very, very low expectations from the community. Yeah.
Yes, and for our children too, because all they see is a lot of criminality going on. They don't see a lot of Black faces in leadership roles that are actually doing good work. So I say, you know, I talked to the coaches and said, hey, you guys, did you know that air pollution and mental health are correlated? And we shouldn't practice our youth in our little league directly across the street from the industry. And some of those coaches will say, it didn't hurt me. And so that type of ignorance is perpetuated. And so being a criminal looks just like being the mayor, you know, because they're doing the same negative things of harm to the community. Wow. And that's for me what
that's a powerful parallel. Wow, Melanie.
Esther, you know, sometimes, you know, people say, I don't want you to speak, you know, but it's like, that's really what I saw. It was like, wow, this fog is covering all the drug and gun deals. You know, during COVID, we never had a shortage of guns or drugs. We never saw, you know, a lessening of violence. It actually increased. So where were the guns and drugs coming from? We have lots of trains coming in and out of our town. Most of the families here are under poverty level, you know, so they don't have a lot of income to bring drugs and guns.
Right.
You know, those are the things that like awakened me and made me think that it's not something I could conquer. And if I were to take it on, I would want to be able to say I've done something and have the people say we have something out of this.
So you talked about you just said that you felt like this was not a situation that you could conquer, but tell me about a situation or an instance in which your voice made a difference.
I think that when I learned about the health harms that Clairton Coke Works was causing under Dave Smith, he was with the Clean Air Council, and he had a campaign called Legacy of Losses. And at that time, I had returned from North Carolina to bury my father. And that was in 2013. And within 6 months, I buried my mother.
Mercy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, within 2 years, my eldest sister, and 5 years later, my baby brother. So from 2011 to 2020, I had buried all of my immediate family. And Dave Smith's campaign really awakened me to say there's something not right, and we should be speaking out, and we should have a lot more voices to speak out. He had only asked me to gather 10 people, and I couldn't gather more than 5 at the time. And that was a time when I felt like the people heard me, and the outside community realized there were people who did care about themselves and their well-being, and they were willing to stand up to a multi-billion-dollar industry.
That's powerful. That's amazing. And it's those wins. They seem small and incremental, but that's what this is honestly about. The tagline for the Black Wave are our voices are the ripples that make waves. It's those small individual voices, those impacts that collectively will be the wave of change. And so I congratulate you. I know sometimes we have wins and we don't celebrate them, but I congratulate you because gathering people, even 5 people in a city where people are more concerned about their jobs than their health, because both the industry provides both income and harms. You know what I'm saying? Being able to gather people when it's against their financial interests, that's a win. That's a win that you need to celebrate. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, so as a person, so tell me about your earliest voting experience.
My earliest voting experience was in North Carolina, was in Virginia, because yes, I was 18.
Okay, walk me through your day. How did that happen?
Well, I would say, like I told you, that school was very, they valued that every one of their students were educated fully. Mm-hmm. So I knew in that high school experience that I had a right to vote, and actually that there was blood shed for me to have that right. So it was actually a duty of mine to vote. Mm-hmm. Whether I liked who I was voting for or not wasn't necessarily to be considered at that time. It was just make sure that you vote.
Yeah.
So our voting, well, at that time, I didn't live out in the countryside. I was in the city, but it was a distance. It wasn't like right down the street to get to it. Mm-hmm. And it was new to me because I had been by my father's side as he ran for mayor, and it was always a lot of us, people who looked like me, and very supportive, but this was a group, and they were very nice and kind, but there were very few faces who looked like mine, and they were saying, I hope you vote for, or I hope you like, and that was new to me. And, and I didn't grow up in that area, so I didn't know any of those people. I didn't know them to really feel sure whether they would or wouldn't do what they said they would. So I tended to kind of lean into my friends and who they said they were voting for. And I just hoped that they had trusted the right person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you feel coming out of that? Like your first time voting at 18 years old. So you were a newly eligible voter and you were excited to go cast your ballot.
Yes. I was definitely happy to, claim my adulthood, and for I think it was celebratory in my family, because my family truly believed in the makeup of America. I mean, we knew that the history wasn't as accurate, but I think that they trusted that there could be a democracy, and that all votes could matter. That's something. So it was like celebratory for them, because they were saying, they welcome me, to be able to sit at the table now and talk politics with them. To have a voice, right? They would ask me how I thought about a particular candidate, or did I look into their background.
So civic engagement was a part of your family values, as it was for me. It sounds like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Community. Yeah.
So contrast that with now, how you're feeling about voting now in 2024, the barriers, all the things that have contrast that excitement and that feeling that you had then with where you are now, and tell me how you got there.
Sure. So now, after knowing this mayor, has been the type of mayor that he's been, and seeing the number of minority faces who support him and who will be actively at the polls, it just made me think, like, if you have enough money, you can pay anybody to do anything. And that it took me back to that place where we didn't have rights, because it feels as if I don't have rights here, because the mayor has been mayor. I can't remember how many terms, but my father ran against him. And I think there was one other person who ran against him since he's been in office, and he's still winning. The truth about how he failed to serve the community, the truth about the fires burning for over 100 days, in contrast to, East Palestine, Ohio's experience, we don't have that talk. So it makes it, I don't feel happy voting. I get up and I do it because I'm trying to hear my dad, and I hear my history teacher in my heart, from Virginia saying there were people who died for you to have this right. So don't give it up. But I will say that being back here in Southwest Pennsylvania for these last few years has really made me think very negatively about the ability to affect change. It's like people are so, how would you say it? They believe that they have no power.
That they have no voice. Yeah.
Yes. And so the industry is so much bigger and the money that it makes is so much more valuable. Why should I even try? And so that defeatist experience kind of settles into me sometimes. I look and I don't see much change, That's even in the elections. Yeah.
It's understandable. And I think it's something, I think it's one of the main things that we have to overcome in every election, the feeling that our voices don't have power, because if they didn't, they wouldn't try so hard to disenfranchise us through, voter purging, through the felony disenfranchisement that you've talked about, through all the ways in which gerrymandering, all the ways in which they try to weaken our vote if those votes didn't matter. But it's something that we all grapple with. And so that's why I really wanted to kick off this this segment, this Black Wave podcast with your voice, because I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people who are also feeling apathetic, like their voices don't matter, but they do. And that's my message to everyone. Our voices do matter. And part of the strategy is to make us think that they don't. So
yes. And we thank you, because you're keeping in mind helps us to get back into the game, to get back, to get back on the horse and return to the table with a new perspective, new eyes, new ears, new heart. And that's where I feel like our race we're always able to overcome.
Yeah.
Even when they try to put us in the worst situation and predicament, we can come out, stronger because of people like you who have the fortitude to say, let's not stop here. Let's remember, and let's also look forward to the future.
We have to be persistent. It's hard. I certainly have my moments too. I went through I'm not voting in this election for a couple cycles, but you get back, like you said, you got to get back on the horse because our voices are needed. And to that end, what do you think it's going to take to reach the disengaged and apathetic Black voters in 2024 across Appalachia and America?
I always think intimacy, looking at someone in their eyes, shaking their hand, giving them a hug, letting them know they've been heard, giving them opportunity to see where others felt the same way, but they made a change. And, that by them returning to their voting duties, they were able to gain and access things that they weren't. I think that is what we all want. Right? We all want to be heard and seen
and acknowledged. That's right.
Yes. And we want to see change. We want to experience and feel.
Right. Not platitudes, not pandering. We want the real deal. That's right.
Right. Keep saying, I'm tired of being tired. Well, what can we do to not be tired? Right. And what will it look like? So who plays a role in this? Who are we leaning on to take that emotion and feeling away, and how can we unite together to maybe relieve the tiredness, to actually nap together and say, we don't have to carry on this way. We don't have to keep going. Take a break, take a rest, rethink, relook at, refocus, like how you're helping me to realize how my opinions may shape my children. So now I'm going to go back and have conversations with them so that I haven't, rubbed off on them any negative emotions about this, that they can stay stain free through the process.
Yeah. If you had one statement that you would leave with people who are feeling like you, who are feeling overburdened, tired, feeling like their voices aren't heard or don't matter, what would you say to them about the 2024 election?
I think I would use what you had said, which is we are more powerful than we know. And we can realize that by how much force we have against us. And that for me is exactly, remembering all that we have against us.
Yeah.
Should inspire us to know we are powerful and that our votes definitely matter. The unity of our votes can make a humongous impact.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie, so much for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. And if you would like to be a part of the Black Wave and share your voice on the 2024 elections and just advocacy and Black perspectives in general, we'd love to have you. Check out our webpage to learn more and get involved. Thank you again, Melanie.
Thank you. See you all soon.